My Life as a Teenage Robot is one of those rare Nicktoons that took itself seriously on every level. I mean, obviously it's a comedy, almost every show the network's ever made has been, but a show like this displays a very modern, forward-thinking approach to writing and character development that isn't always present in Nick's intents and values. You'll see in this review that I have nothing but praise for My Life as a Teenage Robot's direction and presentation, and I'm happy that it holds up as well as I remember. That doesn't mean I haven't got a few metal bones to pick with it, but we'll get to those when we get to those. How did a show like this come to be in the first place? The man this show came from was Rob Renzetti, who would have otherwise been known as a good friend of Craig McCracken and Gendy Tartakovsky, whom I've previously talked about, and a director on Dexter's Laboratory. So if you've got this Mandela effect false memory that Teenage Robot was a Cartoon Network show, I don't blame you. As the original run of Dexter's wrapped up, Renzetti moved to Nickelodeon to work on their new anthology series, Frederator's Oh Yeah Cartoons, in 1998. One of the shorts he created was based on an idea about a teenage girl whose boyfriend was a robot. Ah shoot, they only gave me one sheet of paper, might as well combine them. My Neighbor Was a Teenage Robot premiered on January 5th, 1999, and it was a fairly good short compared to the rest of them, with action, comedy, and character growth on par with that of a full-fledged show. So, Nickelodeon made it a full-fledged show, the third and last after two others that I may get to someday. Some things were tweaked and the pilot was redone, but the first season was fully completed by 2002. However, it wouldn't start airing until August 1st, 2003. I have a few theories as to why Nickelodeon had a thing for delaying this show right off the bat. 1. Executives may have been hesitant broadcasting a predominantly action show so soon after 9/11. This is the one I think makes the most sense from a PR stance. 2. Season 2 didn't finish production until sometime in 2004 or 5, so perhaps they needed to be at a certain point in the second season's production before the first could start airing. 3. Nickelodeon can't make a logical schedule to save its spongy keister. As the years went on, it got harder and harder to find on Nickelodeon's feed, at least in the US. I still found it easy to find on the New Zealand channel well into 2008. Eventually, Teenage Robot suffered the same fate as most 21st century Nicktoons, artificially weakened ratings and a channel hop to Nicktoons where it could die peacefully at 3 very short seasons. And even then, they dumped the show there several years too late, so it wasn't a dignified ending at all, to put it generously. How could this be? This is only the 13th Nicktoon they screwed over. Sure, this show had a worse executive treatment than others, and it only has 39 half-hour episodes to its name, but I'm happy it ended as soon as it made an impact, and is now considered a cult classic for many a good reason. This series takes place a couple decades into the future. It's not very important how many decades, but rather what happens in them. A lot of mass destruction. So, a robotics scientist, Dr. Wakeman, creates some robots to help save the day, one of which is XJ9, but she calls herself Jenny. After keeping her locked in her bedroom for 5 years, she breaks out, hangs out with some kids, and learns what it's like to have fun and live a somewhat normal life. Many of the show's plotlines center around Jenny's frustrations surrounding saving the world every day, while still trying to look and act like a girl and make friends. Sound familiar? I'm not one to point my finger at a work that shares a hefty amount in common to a previous work, but My Life as a Teenage Robot feels like the Powerpuff Girls for teenagers. The action-comedy blend, the retro art style, the strict parent with a fun side, the gradual shift to self-referential writing, this is by and large a spiritual follow-up to another network's big hit, and I like that. Fans of Powerpuff who are growing out of kindergarten and elementary school settings and personalities could switch to Nickelodeon and see themselves in Jenny now. I get the sense that's just a happy coincidence, and Renzetti did direct a few Powerpuff Girls episodes, so it's not like he ripped it off or anything, but it's still a bizarre thing, and a convenient one too for viewers who were starting to grow up. To Powerpuff Girls fans, Teenage Robot treads familiar territory, and although I like Powerpuff Girls a lot more, I just find its stories snappier and more endearing. Teenage Robot isn't half bad by itself. I'll get a little more into this show's presentation quirks in a bit, but this story's given us some characters, and I want to see how they're utilised. First up is Jenny, who's a little shy but very entertaining to watch in any circumstance. Right, you're not going to believe this, but this is a main character who's also my favourite character on the show. I know, I'm just as surprised as you. Jenny's best friend is Brad, a teenage boy who's pretty Ron Stoppable-esque. They're both the quirky best friend who are naive of how socially inept they are, and go on generally sillier misadventures. I could see why shows about girls have guy characters like this. They're designed to not be as strong as their female friends, but they've got a fun side that makes them equally fun to watch. Brad has a little brother, Tuck, who's quite annoying at points, but I can relate. The younger a character is, the more I can tolerate them needing to learn basic lessons if they're still likable overall, which Tuck is. Dr. Wakeman, Jenny's creator and mother, is another character I enjoyed seeing. I didn't quite warm to her the same way I did with Utonium, but I found her interesting nevertheless. The last main character introduced was Sheldon, a geeky teenager that has a crush on Jenny. I don't mind that he becomes the group's 4th or 5th ranger over time, since they gradually gave him more and more interesting things to do to compensate. However, he sometimes tries to woo Jenny by using a robot suit he calls the Silver Shell. I hate the Silver Shell episodes. They all follow the exact same pattern. Sheldon appears in the shell, Jenny gets smitten for him, Sheldon does something stupid, Jenny then hates him. Rinse and repeat with no developments or reveals. Those might have happened if the show got more seasons, but I wouldn't count on that. Jenny's main adversaries are the Cluster, a race of evil aliens from another planet that seek to wipe out humans. Translators note that race Jenny spends most of her time saving. Vexus is the queen of them and is the most hell-bent on stealing Jenny in some way or another. The thing that stuck out to me the most was her voice actress, Eartha Kitt, who also voiced Yzma in the Emperor's New Groove franchise, and she's got a very distinct voice.
You're no longer a spring chicken, whereas I still have 20 years left on my warranty.
How is this?
Yeah, that's good.
Now ask him which way the talking llama went.
There's also Smitus, the brawn to Vexus's brain, but he's far less interesting. I don't know, he's fine, but doesn't have the same pull as Vexus, or the same comedic value as Krakus, an old scientist robot whose inventions keep falling apart. He's more useful than you'd think though, and he makes for a hilarious comic relief. More minor villains are the biker gang of frogs, basically this show's Gang Green Gang, but I'd argue they're a teensy bit more developed, with a weird twist that they're actually model citizens on their homeworld and just wreck Earth to blow off steam. Now here are some characters for all the high school bully fans out there, the Crust Cousins, Brett and Tiff. They are just so unquestionably okay. Like, they get the job done as more light-hearted antagonists, getting their just desserts and all, but they still aren't a reason I'd rewatch the show. On the subject of teenage girls, Jenny sometimes hangs out with her predecessors, XJ128. They're neat, but I couldn't describe them all in order at gunpoint. I only remember the baby, the cleaner, the big buff one, and my favorite, the depressed one. One of the better one-off characters is Vega, Vexus's daughter and heir to the throne, who becomes friends with Jenny. Notice how generally the friendlier a character is to her, the better they are. That's why I don't like Misty, a member of a disbanded teen team of other teenagers with superpowers, who gets into a couple scruffles with Jenny that don't necessarily further one another. So yeah, with the exception of some well-developed villains, there are people who love and loathe Jenny on this show, and I gravitate more towards the former group when I watch the show. Now about this show's writing, I think it gets the job done. They had a lot of influences, not just the Powerpuff Girls. You also get some elements from 20th century science fiction, mecha anime, and in the case of the school episodes, tween sitcoms. It's a bizarre balancing act when you get down to it, but what works is that it's always easing you in and out of all these situations, which isn't very hard to do when the protagonist is two very clearly juxtaposing types of characters. But it isn't just send-ups this show likes to do, it'll sometimes go the extra mile and reference things. It typically doesn't seem like they'd fit in the futuristic setting, but I was consistently impressed at how organic they felt. References don't plague the show or anything, but they're there and you'll have to get used to them. This show's also no stranger to montages. Technically this doesn't have to do with the writing, but you generally still have to put the details of a montage in your script. Some get pretty slow or long, and already the show's pacing isn't lightning fast, but I can always sit through them to the end, no biggie. In general, the show never reached its full potential in dramatic storytelling, which makes it a little underwhelming when you look at it as a full package. However, since it is a softer overall show than it may have evolved into, that means the show's biggest highlights are on Jenny and her integration into society, as she's gradually more welcomed and accepted in spite of her bizarre nature. This is super sweet, and the fact that she's a robot keeps it broad enough for universal appeal. Literally everyone can relate to the struggle of fitting in, so what's the harm in a show centered around it? And can I just say more shows should be created by directors, because Renzetti set a new high for animation direction. Even in the weaker written episodes, the staging and timing of everything always feels smooth and engaging. Even in more casual stories, there's a lot of thought and effort put into colours and lighting that the show's staff deserves some respect for putting in week after week. But the action scenes, man, these shows just make me like watching them more and more, and Teenage Robot doesn't disappoint. They're always effective in looks and sound design with music that isn't overbearing, and smart colour choices. This show loves itself some colour palette changes, rarely ever just to look pretty, but always for dramatic effect. It reminds me a lot of Mega Man and how each power-up has a different colour associated with it. You can tell why I've been playing Mega Man music for most of the video. There aren't many seasons, but I still think each of them had a different kind of impact on the series. Season 1, despite kickstarting a very strange concept, feels more easygoing. There's a reason most Season 1s generally feel softer than the rest of the show. They need to make sure the audience is comfortable with them, and Teenage Robot did that without much issue. Season 2 upped the ante and had some more intense stories, and Season 3 brought things down a notch and focused more on comedy. Even with these mild shifts in tone, the show stayed consistently interesting. Not necessarily great in Season 3's case, but what can you do? I think highly of My Life as a Teenage Robot at the end of the day, and here's some episodes that show off its biggest strengths. Let's get this ball rolling with See No Evil, where Dr. Wakeman gives Jenny a new pair of eyes that she finds bulky and lame in spite of their efficiency. It's a very basic teenage issue that's given a neat robot twist and a very happy ending for the internet. After that, there's Speak No Evil, where Jenny forgets how to speak English on a trip to Japan, and there's also this kaiju she brought back roaming around. It's just bizarre enough to work, and I don't know if they got Jenny's voice actress to speak actual Japanese or not, but she did a really good job here. The return of Raggedy Android sees an old creepy human suit from a previous episode get reworked into a terrifying exoskeleton that controls Jenny by speaking out her neck. It's just as spooky as it sounds, and it's also got my favorite line in the entire show.
You're just a girl. It's not normal for girls to save boys.
Well, it's normal for this girl to save everybody.
It's so perfect. Daydream Believers got a lot of visual spectacle, with Jenny getting a dream chip that she overuses, and most of her dreams are drawn in the style of Dr. Seuss. An odd choice at first, but I think it works well in being deceptively colourful. Trade Show Showdown is the Jenny Dr. Wakeman episode to end all others, as they go to a trade show where one of the Doctor's old rivals meets up with her again, and Jenny does some more battling with Vexus. There's little wrong with this one, I just found it action-packed and sweet. The Wonderful World of Wesley sees Jenny go to a Disneyland knockoff and get triggered by all the robots being stationary, so she sets them free. It does not go over well. This is another one where the visual design team put their all in, even if it's not the most serious thing in the world. Last Action Zero is one of those wacky Brad episodes where he joins Sky Patrol, but is stuck with endless paperwork. I know I'm watching a great comedy-based episode of any show if I'm laughing practically the whole way through. Around the World in 80 Pieces is a trip around the world to find Jenny's parts, which are scattered by Krakus in an accidentally competent manner. This is just how the Earth is going to look in the 2070s, not that I mind. Then we've got Kilgore, about an annoying little wind-up toy played by who else? Again, this is just a very funny episode. It's just fun seeing Jenny have all these varying reactions towards Kilgore over a stretch of time. My favourite thing from this show was its sole TV movie, Escape from Cluster Prime, where Jenny gets stuck on Vexus' home planet and becomes friends with her daughter Vega. There's just one little issue: the whole cluster has been conditioned to hate Jenny and the Earth is in danger. After that comes Victim of Fashion, a very montage-heavy episode, but they benefit the plot, so who gives a darn? Jenny being able to customize her body to make all these different outfits is an interesting concept, and they use it in ways they knew would fill 22 minutes. I also really like Toying with Jenny, where Krakus tricks her into endorsing a line of dolls that start killing everyone. So someone definitely set these things to evil this time. I also really like Brad and Tuck arguing over how to handle the climax in a rather meta way. They're the sorts of issues that a writer should focus on. My favourite short-form episode is Histrionics, where the gang meet Walter Wesley on a deserted island making animatronic historical figures. Don't adjust your speakers, this is a real episode, and it's tense, funny, and an engaging watch from start to finish. Stage Fright involves Jenny partaking in a school production of Romeo and Juliet, with this harsh director that I really like for some reason, and an alien invasion that teaches everyone not to judge a book by its cover. The last episode I'd say I loved was Agent 00 Sheldon, where Sheldon joins this secret agency just so he can spy on Jenny some more. But to be fair, both the robots and the agency were acting very suspicious, so you really have to wonder what you yourself would do in this situation. If you couldn't tell already, this show had a lot of ambitious ideas, but what about the ones that didn't work out so well? First up is Ear No Evil, by far the weakest of the Sets No Evil miniseries, because it's the least unique. Ginny wants robo-ears, Sheldon makes some for her, they ruin her life. It's nothing interesting, even including the out-of-place medieval villain. The Great Unwashed then has Ginny go to a car place to get a paint job for a party. There's a lot of effort placed into the juxtaposition of a dingy car place and a beautiful makeover that I didn't find all too funny, and surprise surprise it doesn't work. But the worst episode is without a doubt I Was a Preschool Dropout, where Ginny's put in a preschool because she's revealed to physically only be 5 years old, and everyone's a jerk to everyone, even the teacher who you'd think would have an inkling of responsibility. I would recommend staying away from this one. This Time with Feeling was a mix of unsettling and annoying, not my favourite hybrid. Ginny finally learns how it feels to touch things, and when she switches it to pain, it results in a very frustrating sequence of her failing to do a test. Teen Team Time and the other Misty episodes don't really work because I don't have much reason to be invested in them in the first place, but Missed Opportunities in particular was pretty weak due to how her dynamic was going in circles at that point. I could also put every Silver Shell episode on this list, but I'll just stick to A Pain in My Sidekick, which not only has the laziest use of its formula, but also Tuck being incredibly annoying. This was not one of those times I could sympathize with him. Teen Idol features yet another alien race that Ginny has to deal with, only this time they idolize her, and are very annoying as they do so. It manages to be dumb and forgettable, but at least it leads into one of the most memorable episodes of the show, good old Sheldon. Then there's A Spoonful of Mayhem, which is memorable for the wrong reasons. It's a whole episode focused on the Sky Patrol General and how much he wants to be a hero, even though he never deserves it. He's just a plot device, and those aren't fun to watch for 11 minutes. Last of all is Samurai Vac, an episode I'm convinced they made just to use the title. You've got this vacuum that lives in this particularly mean part of Japan and needs to reclaim his honor. Too bad his catch of being a serious sentient cleaning product wears out faster than the writers thought it would. But putting aside the lower ranking episodes and some dirty little habits, I'd say give this show a whirl, it needs more attention. Every time I watch it, I'm reminded of the effort that dozens of talented artists and crew members put into what was not necessarily a popular show right out the gate. I'm happy My Life as a Teenage Robot became a sleeper hit, and built up a strong, healthy fanbase over time that shows no signs of disappearing. In particular, I noticed a lot of them are passionate about getting it back on the air with new episodes, but you know what? I'm happy with what I've got. Another season or two would be great, but I had my fill of Jenny and her adventures with just 3. The best of this show sticks out among the best of what I've reviewed this year, and I'll get to that soon enough. Goodbye for now.